So today's probably gonna be a pretty short meeting. I didn't prepare anything special. Sometimes we have a little dog and pony show. Don't have one today, sorry. Let's take a look at the releases that we have coming up. So I'll start with the going chronological order here. So we just recently released what I talked about last time, which was HDF4 4.3. So that went very smoothly. And then the next release for that is gonna be 4.0, which would be next year in February. Not on this graphic here. I'll probably extend this out. Um, but yeah, that will. So this one we split the private and public API. We dropped XDR support, and did a bunch of other cleanup, and then we're gonna drop the Fortran 77 API, probably the NetCDF 2.3 to API, and maybe create a unified single library so that it behaves just like HDF5. But I don't know, that might annoy a lot of people, so I might not do that. We'll see. I'll have to ask around at the meetings this year. Then what's coming up for HDF5 is, so we have, so as you can see, as a reminder, we've dropped support for 1.8, for 1.10, and for 1.12. Those are no longer supported. Everybody should migrate to 1.14. There are many options to deal with both API and file format compatibility. If you do not want to use the newest features, the latest API, don't want to update your apps, you can build 1.14 with the 1.12 API or the 1.10 API or the 1.8 API or the 1.6 API. You can also pick file formats. So nobody should be afraid of moving to this version. It's significantly more bug fixed and stable than these older versions. What we're going to have in 1.14.4, we'll mostly have native float 16 support, maybe a few tweaks for cloud optimized HDF5 and the read-only S3 VFD. But it's mostly just a maintenance release, focusing on our own internal CI and release processes and things like that. So, and then we'll have another release in the fall, and we don't really have anything specific planned for that. We may have complex number support. That was a thing we would like to do, but we didn't have time to get that into this release. So we may have complex numbers here. And then we're on, it's unclear what other sorts of features we would have then. But we plan to do 2 maintenance releases, one in March and one in September from here going forward. Oh, and we should be having a big security patch coming in, hopefully this week, that will have a bunch of tweaks for various file format parsing bugs and stuff, similar to what we did with the CVE issues in the past. So hopefully we'll get that in this week and get that reviewed and get that in, because that'll fix a few of our open issues. And then HDFView will release version 3.3.2 will release in April. So after we do HDF4 in February, we do HDF5 in March, and then we release HDFView in April. We don't really do an HDF, like a fall HDF4 or HDFView release. If there was a big enough feature in it, we would probably think about doing it, but usually there's not. So we'll just we release it. It's got has bug fixes and uses updated versions of HDF5 and HDF4. So that's what we have going on now. Does anybody have any questions? I guess, Robert, do you have any questions? Since everybody else works for the company.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Dana. And you had the 2.0 flavor, but
Yeah.
a lot of that is still TBD. Do you have any idea sort of when
Yeah,
when that's going to take shape?
I really want to like the one of the key reasons that we would go to HDF5 2.0 is we want to do semantic versioning, right? It drives people bananas that we don't ever increment the major version. And so, I mean, we do SO numbers correctly. We do SO numbers correctly now in HDF4 as of our last release. But so we're getting the SO versioning correct in terms of like how we bump current, release, and age. I think are the 3 numbers. But we don't bump these numbers, right? It's been HDF version 4 since 1992, I think. And so, you know, the API has added and removed calls and stuff like that. We've never bumped this, right? Because to us, this mostly means file format, right? File format and data model. And so 4 that hasn't changed in forever. But and you know, and the HDF4 moniker is kind of new. Yeah, we just did that when we came out with HDF5. And HDF5, we just had HDF5 versus 1 for forever. It's not HDF5, 5, point whatever. So what I do want to switch this to doing semantic versioning. HDF4, I'm not so sure about. We'll have to figure that out. That's more complicated, I think, because of its long, long, long history. But I kind of want to save this for when, not just to do it right now so that people have semantic versioning right away, and sometimes I think about doing that, but I kind of want to save that for bigger changes. Like if I'm going to go through and like change the API or something like that, because it's like it's a signifier, right? It's like here's this thing, and it's a big change because finally, after 25 years of HDF5, we're finally changing it to 2, and so I do want to put more stuff into that. But at the same time, I don't want to annoy everybody, right? Like I don't want to like change stuff so much that people's applications break and nobody wants to migrate to it. So I think the next time we have like a big feature come out or something like that, like we really could have done it in 114. Like that could have been HDF5 2.0 with the modern vol and all that stuff. But I think the next time we have a major thing come out. Is that next year? I don't know. Usually we go on average about 3 years between major releases. So it could be that as we go through and we make different decisions about file format stuff and things like that. Maybe there's gonna be some changes that come. I don't know. Um, but yeah, but I'm kind of keeping that in my pocket until we have something that's kind of big, right? Because I don't want to like release here's HDF5 2.0 and it doesn't really have anything. It's just a maintenance release. Then I think people wouldn't be very excited about that. And we thought about, do we deprecate things? It's like, it's one of the things that's nice about HDF5 is you can say, hey, build me the library and give me the 1.6 API. And even like crazy old, I mean, that's the standard version for NASA for a long time has been 1.6. And that's just because nobody bothered to update the document. And we're gonna change that, I think, this year so that it's 114. But if you have old 1.6 apps, I think HDF EOS, for example, uses the 1.6 API. You can build HDF5 114 with the 1.6 API, and you get all the benefits of, I mean, you don't get the benefits of using the latest data structures and stuff in the file, but whatever security things we've implemented and stuff like that, like you get that. Right? So um, being able to build with the fanciest, the newest compilers. I mean, if you tried to build 1.6 out of the box, I don't know how exciting, how great of an experience you would get on like NVIDIA's compilers or the One API. It might be trying to do old style Intel stuff and dying on you. So, yeah, or if you wanted to like build like 1.6 with like Visual Studio 2022, would that work? I don't know. But it definitely, I don't even think we had CMake like that long ago. So you'd be building with the old weird Visual Studio projects. So yeah, so I'm hesitant to rip stuff out that's old for backwards compatibility. So I don't know. But there are some API calls I would like to change. I would like to make it so that everything returns either an HIDT or an HRT. And we have a few things that return pointers or return like just random integers and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of doing that. I think that those should all be passed through out parameters. You should have because then otherwise you have like if you're trying to use the HDF5 API, you have like 4 different ways to check for errors, right? Depending on whether it's an integer or an address or a size or you don't want that. You want like basically people that check this look at error values. And and speaking of error values, I mean, I did put in a Chan Zuckerberg grant to update some of the error handling stuff so that instead of just returning -1, right, which is I think the only thing we ever return throughout the entire library, even like the bad ID H5I invalid hid is just basically a type def -1, right? So I'd like to return more informative error codes so that user applications can potentially do something, right? So if basically we failed because there was a memory issue, right? You want to return an error code that says like, oh, hey, there was a memory issue because that's something that an application could do something about, right? Whereas, if it's an internal library, there's nothing you can do. You should just shut down. So, or if it's a file error, right? Like, if you're trying to open a file and the permissions are wrong, we want to return like a subset of user actionable, like basically enum values instead of just -1. So that application code. I mean, this is I think requested mostly by places like Python, right? Like, so you got the H5 wrappers, and they wanted to know, like, if was there like a big error, or was there just you're not allowed to touch that file. They want to know that stuff. So we want to make that easier. So we'll see. I'll know like sometime this month if we got that money or not. But that's something I would also like to do.
Okay. Well, having the ability to build these very old releases, say a 1.6 with a modern build system, that's a huge win, because sometimes just carrying forward that old release into a modern build system is a tremendous amount of work. And
Mhm.
so just having that available right out of the box, that's quite nice.
Mhm. Yeah, and just I mean, stuff changes. I mean, you do have to change your build options and stuff like that. I mean, when we went from 1.8 to 1.10, we changed quite a bit how the build system, at least for the auto tools, worked in terms because you could then specify individually things like different optimization levels on a separate, using different configure options, right? It wasn't just like C flags equals this. You could specify, a wider variety of things, and then we would figure out what to do for that specific compiler. And so we did change like, the names of a few configure options and stuff like that, but those should be pretty easy for most people to modify and not like have to modify your whole big application. Um, so we try to be pretty conservative about how we modify that stuff. And we'll probably have, I have a feeling that the documentation we're gonna have to write for NASA when they update from 1.6 to 1.14, I feel like there's gonna be a document that comes out of that that will explain a lot of this stuff in gory detail because they're gonna need to know. And so that would just be a public document that we would, share on, via the newsletter, and I would talk about it in one of these meetings and stuff. So there'd be um, quite a bit of noise about that in case we put that in the user guide so that people can see like how to upgrade and stuff in different ways. I think that it's kind of a black box. It's kind of like you can do it, but unless you're like an expert and know all those things exist, 'cause I think that's not very common. Um, it's it's not easy to find that information.
Right.
We'll try to do that this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? All right. I can get back to getting ready for my next meetings. All right. Thanks for coming, and see you guys all later.
Thanks, Dana. Bye.
Bye.